Well, welcome everyone to our inaugural meeting of the Public Safety Committee. I want to thank everyone for being here, and certainly thank the members of council around the table as well as staff who have put together a good agenda for us today, and then certainly laid out the framework for what's to come of this committee and really how we plan on shaping it. I think I guess I need a motion to approve the agenda. And then I'm going to hand it over to the city manager. Mayor Reardon, Councillor Stewart, good to go. Over to the city manager.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, good afternoon. As part of the call to the order today, I thought I would provide a very quick introduction as to the at this inaugural meeting of the Public Safety Committee. I certainly don't want to get into the follow-on agenda items that speak about the orientation and the terms of reference, but simply to set the stage up front and for the public awareness as well. Often when we speak about public safety, we default to the assumption that what we are talking about is police and fire services and perhaps emergency medical response, ambulatory services, and paramedics. That is certainly part of public safety. But when this particular Public Safety Committee was envisioned and created and briefed to council last March and supported by council, we were using a more holistic term or a holistic definition of public safety. And that is to say, yes, emergency response and emergency responders, to be sure, but also any other items that would affect the overall safety of the community. And I stress overall safety of the community. I don't believe it is the role of this committee to deal with one of safety issues of one particular resident or business. We will, of course, deal with those, but not through the committee structure. The committee is focused more on the systemic issues, on the strategy and the policies and procedures related to overall safety of the community. So when we speak about public safety in this committee, and when we determine what agenda items will come forward to this committee, we are taking that more holistic view of public safety. And I just wanted to get that into the record here at the first meeting prior to us going through the entire orientation. But in terms of a committee structure, this is like the other two committees that we have had before us. That is to say, it is a standing committee. It will be supported by the city clerk's office in terms of public record keeping, organization, etc. And the membership is the same as the other two committees. That is to say, 5 members of council, one of which is the mayor. And with that, Mr. Chair, I hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. I'm going to hand it over to the lead staff person for the committee, which is Chief Kevin Clifford.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Hickey, members of the Public Safety Committee. It's an honor to have been asked to take the lead position within staff's role of providing support to the Public Safety Committee of Council. As a staff group providing support to the Public Safety Committee of Council, I can tell you we have a tough act to follow. Both the Finance and Growth Committees have achieved significant success and have received significant support from the respective leads, Commissioner Jacqueline Hamilton and the Chief of Staff, CFO, Kevin Fudge. I can share with you that your core city support team of Tim O'Reilly, Laurel McEwen-Wells, Deputy Mike Carr, Deputy Rob Nickel, and myself, as well as the clerk's office, are motivated by the idea of supporting Public Safety Committee of Council as it works to fulfill the mandate is approved by Common Council, the mandate being to provide a comprehensive and strategic public safety approach that ensures a significant and continuous commitment to safety by the City of St. John for those who work, visit, play, and live in our community. I have often said personally the public safety officials need to work hard to be on the good side of bad events, that we need to be tirelessly committed to understanding safety processes in all aspects of our services before an inquest causes us to drill down on what went wrong. It is so much better to be on the right side, on this side. Later this afternoon, I will reference the principles of high reliability organizations. I believe this inaugural meeting of the Public Safety Committee of Council for the City of St. John, by default, just by its being, has adopted some of those principles. I believe the Public Safety Committee of Council for the city is both aspirational and transformational in achieving our mandate for safety for those who visit, work, play in our community, and live in our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. And I'll just offer some opening comments and then pass it over to members of the committee to share their thoughts as well. Just really as an opportunity to offer your insight on the committee, what you hope to get out of the committee, what you hope to see the committee achieve as well. And certainly, I think in launching the Public Safety Committee will truly, I hope, set a foundation for dialogue, policy, action on all issues of public safety in the city. As the city manager and the chief alluded to, our scope will stretch from fire and police to road safety and active transportation. And with this kind of level of depth in our agenda, I hope that we are truly focused and rooted in an assessment of value for St. Johners and value for taxpayers. As we start to tackle these big issues, it is my hope that this committee takes time to take the opportunity to work on renewed relationships with our protective service. Certainly our relationship with police and fire has been fractured over the past few years, and I hope as chair of this committee, certainly recognize our ability to separate our financial commitments and financial duties to these to our protective service from our commitment to respect our frontline protective services and build renewed relationships with them. And I hope that this committee takes the opportunity to recognize our chance to build that positive narrative in the city. And I'm also hoping that this is the group to make that happen, and I'm confident in that. I'd now like to turn to any other members of the committee that would like to share some thoughts. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, very happy to see this committee standing up and moving forward. I think, priorities for your city, we still haven't had that conversation as council, and it's coming, but what you spend time on and time studying obviously indicates what's important, and growth has been important, finances have been important, but certainly at the base of it all is making sure that our citizenry is safe. And you made a very good comment, Mr. Chair, when you said, value for St. Johners. Going over the kit and our mandate and kind of as we get started, one of the things just moving forward, I'll just make note of that I would like to see us do a little more of that isn't currently in the schedule. The public safety services are a third of St. John's overall budget at about $50 million, give or take. And I know in my past experiences on the St. John Police Commission, they do a very good job of bringing dashboards and data, currently on a bit of hiatus as we recover from the cyber attack. But I would love to see that as a regular standing item at the Public Safety Committee, both the dashboard that the St. John Police have, that it shows things like the number of traffic tickets this month, this year, compared to last month, that sort of data. It's really good information. Mental health related calls that really help highlight that as a concern in the community and for police, to the number of hours that their volunteer police auxiliary put in again this year compared to last year. So if we could have a consistent dashboard so that as we move forward, we are using data to make decisions and show that value and sustainability for the citizenry, I think it would be very valuable. The schedule that's put out that we're going to talk about later in the orientation covers a lot of ground and very broad spectrum, and I think it's good in overall public safety for the city. That be as it may, at the basis, $50 million is going into making sure we're safe, and I think regular reporting back, and if we put it on a consent agenda item, it doesn't have to be talked about, but quarterly, to have those reports come back, I think would be very good data for council and for the citizens. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Pass it over to Mrerp.
Thank you. I guess all I'll really say is that it's interesting and exciting to be on this committee. As Councillor Sullivan said, it's a third of our budget, but I don't think you really appreciate the scope of work that's involved in it and the scope of what it all covers until you really do that dive into it, and we haven't had that opportunity really as a council because we've been busy with, I guess, doing finance and doing growth. And to have this opportunity is really great. I think it's great for us as councillors. I think it's great for the public to have this information as well. So it's that deeper dive, and it just gets the information out there of what's actually happening in the community versus, you know, this is what we're paying. But I think this is so important for everyone to have the information. So like I said, it's really a great opportunity, and I'm thrilled to be on public safety because it does cover a bigger spectrum. And when you think about it, most people will only think fire and police, but like we've said, it's, you know, it's bike lanes, it's all kinds of other safety issues that impact the quality of life for citizens. So good to be here. Thanks to everyone for joining the team. It's great.
Thank you, Mayor Reardon. Anyone else? Councillor Stewart, did you want to share any? All right, we'll dive right into the agenda. Into the consent agenda, 2.1, terms of reference. Anyone, any questions, comments from council? Okay, I'll ask for a motion to accept the consent agenda. Councillor Sullivan, Mayor Reardon. On to business matters 3.1, Public Safety Committee orientation. Oh, we do need to vote on that, of course. All in favor? Okay, motion's passed. Moving into 3.1, Public Safety Committee orientation. Pass it over to Chief Clifford.
Basically, we'll discuss a number of the items that the council would have acted on back in March when they adopted the Public Safety Committee as being a committee of council. And let me get this slide up. So we'll review the Public Safety Committee, the framework, the strategic framework for municipal decision making. We'll be asking the Public Safety Committee to recommend to council that they adopt the Safety Continuity Management Program, and we'll show you that later in the presentation. And we'll also be asking the Public Safety Committee to adopt for recommendation to council the service review schedule. And when we do that, again, I want to have conversation with the committee, and maybe further to Councillor Sullivan's point, I want to have a conversation with the committee to make sure that that schedule, the schedule we bring forward and the items we bring forward in the October meeting do not have to be as presented. Again, we've touched on highlights, and I very much appreciate that the $50 million that is spent on public safety. This committee is actually broader than that, in that all of our services, the complete budget, should be under the auspices of safety. Everything we do is about providing customer safety. And so whether it's our lifeguards, whether it's our road crews, so this committee, at least the direction we received from council, was about doing an analysis of all of our service. And so I think it's about the $165 million, and I don't have the exact figure. I think it's about all of our budget. It's all about all of our budget. The mandate is to provide a comprehensive and sustainable public safety approach that ensures a significant and continuous commitment to safety by the City of St. John for those who visit, work, play, and live in our community. Previous adopted resolutions, January 14, 2019, and I think it was moved by Councillor Norton at the time. And again, it was around that concentration, that awareness around public safety expenditure. And again, we've brought forward a broader look, but definitely a review and a lens on these particular police, fire, EMO components. And then in March 22nd of 2021, council adopted.
It was late last week that we were going to be asked to come. And as I've said all along to council at the Board of Police Commissioners meeting when Councillor Sullivan was there and in the past, certainly commissioners as the governing authority over the police department will absolutely participate in the Public Safety Committee and its meetings and through the chief. And I know I just had a short email conversation with Chief Clifford, and there's potential other resources from the police department that may be needed at times. And through the chief, we'll certainly endeavor to have those people present. And I saw on the meeting schedule, community policing in the July meeting, and I know that that was a topic that council had raised in the past. So from that point of view, absolutely we'll bring it back to the commission, who then will refer it to the chief to come back with a report on what they see for the July meeting for community policing, how it's evolved over the years, because, you know, a lot of, as the initial discussions were, a lot of our processes at the police department depend on the budget, and the budget dictates the number of officers, and from that going forward, we try to dictate how are we filling the needs and addressing the issues that we have. So, you know, things change. Successive chiefs have been in place for the last few years, and with that, you know, I'm going to introduce those that don't know him. Chief Robert Bruce is our newest chief from the OPP, retired down here in St. John. He graciously accepted the offer, and we're very pleased and fortunate to have him. So he was saying to me earlier, well, what's the agenda today? What are we dealing with? I said, look, it's an introductory meeting, and I asked Stephanie as to what it was, so Stephanie filled me in. So we're kind of on the same page, but we're certainly cooperative and want to assist the committee with whatever we can do. A lot of what we do is reactive. We don't go out into the community and say, what's your plan for this? You know, dealing with the police department and issues that face it, they're reactive issues. They could be, you know, a nice sunny day, and you look at what happened in Nova Scotia last year with the 22 that were killed. Of course, the police department has a plan in place just based on the number of individuals working and officers working to deal with situations like that. We can't go out into the community and plan those types of events, but we certainly respond to them. And over the years, many things have happened that the police department has dealt with, and we always do follow-ups to figure out, you know, what could we have done better and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, you know, the department faces a number of issues that really aren't for the committee. They're budgetary issues, they're things of that nature. But in the context of the $50 million number, you know, there's some things that we have to prioritize, is a better way to say it, I guess, from the police commission's point of view, so that we can make sure that the citizens in the community are well served by the police department in a safe and secure manner. So if you look at just a little bit of an overview from my experience over 20 years that I've been off and on the police commission, we started when I was first appointed. I think there was over 200 officers. There's now 140 some, and that number, there's a number out on disability, I understand, as well. So we're not at that number. So with what we're expected to do, we have fewer bodies to do it, and we still have to do it. So at the end of the day, it's a bit of a balancing act at times, and I don't think I've said anything off topic, Chief. It's a matter of how do we address situations as it arises. From an emergency measures point of view, there's obviously a role for the police department in everything we do, whether it's public gatherings, whether it's that are planned or unplanned. So, you know, if Chief Clifford needs resources through the chief of those below the chief that are more trained on certain things, we can certainly provide that to them. But unfortunately, we only had an hour today, and we'll stay till that hour's up. But I actually have a meeting with Councillor Killen at 2:30, and the chief has another committee meeting. So, but we appreciate the opportunity, and we'll certainly cooperate wherever we can and provide whatever assistance we can to this committee. If somebody has any questions, I can certainly answer them, or the chief.
Thank you very much, Ed, and certainly thank you for your leadership through the commission, and of course, welcome to our new chief, Robert Bruce, as well. It's great to have you here, and I think as the committee moves forward, hopefully you can become more and more integrated in our operations. I'll hand it back over to Chief Clifford and open it up to any committee members for questions. I'm going to pass it over to Mrerp.
Thank you. Chief, when I read through this, the Plan, Do, Check, Act, in the act component of it, and you referenced a situation where you had a rescue, and that rescue would have been for someone that was in an uncontrolled environment. So you would go back, you can't control what that last situation you talked about. I mean, that is what it is, but you would go back and you would look at, you know, how did you respond? How could you improve, blah, blah, blah. and maybe this isn't the time to ask this, and maybe it's an answer for another day, but I'm just curious about how that response of what you're trying to do integrates in a situation that's a controlled situation. So I think about things like explosions, leaks, et cetera. How would an after-action review work in that situation? You can look at your response and improve your response as much as possible, but if we're not getting, the improvement on the other side of that controlled environment, then how do we get to where we want to go without, I guess, cooperation? And I guess I wouldn't say cooperation. I don't know. Just like you only have control over what you're doing, but how does this after action review? Is it like third party? Is it the person, the entity? Like how do we improve in those situations?
Sure. Through the chairperson to Mayor Reardon, those things that we control, like the response on Sunday, we can control most of all that review. And, one of the tendency, because it was a huge success, and again, I apologize for all the emails you get about it, but it was a huge success. But one of the tendencies is to wipe your brow and just move on and not drill down and look back. And we're doing that. We're drilling down. And there was some things that we need to not do again. When we're working with an environment where we don't have access to all the information, we don't have the ability to bring everybody into the same room, and we don't have the freedom of that, all we can do is manage what we can manage. All we can do is look at what our role was and how we did that, how we operated with other folks. We will still do that after action review. Not that this is the case, but later on in the presentation number 4, I'll talk about observations on a butane incident on Bayside Drive. They were all observations from our perspective. If somebody had done a complete analysis from the whole group, I don't think we've missed anything from our perspective, and that's our role. And we've been very forthcoming in that report. We've spoke about things that and again, it went well. It went well. Nobody was hurt. It never get worse. That's stabilizing the incident. And we made sure people were safe. We returned 84 people to their homes safely. So the incident went well, but we took advantage of that opportunity. And 3 months later, we basically, and again, you read the commentary, we basically hit the ball out of the park on the first flood of the century. So all we can do, Council, Your Worship, all we can do is when we are restricted in how we do those after action reviews, all we can do is look at what we can control.
Well, I guess all I'll say to that then is that if there's any way that we can help facilitate that you have more information on the other side, I think this team would be very supportive. Thank you.
I believe council support of the simulation theater has opened up a lot of windows, and the federal regulation, the E2 regulations around emergency environments has opened up a lot of need for our community stakeholders.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add a point to what the chief has mentioned. All the time when it is a multifaceted response, such as a flood, with all sorts of other government departments and agencies and other organizations involved, our after-action review actually strives to get them all at the table. It's far more productive to get everybody talking about an incident and all of us learning from it, as opposed to each group doing their own individual after-action review. So we do strive for that. Sometimes certain parts of certain organizations have moved on, or they're too busy to participate. But I think it's fair to characterize that in the first response community, certainly police, fire, and those who support them, this whole notion of after-action review, of learning after each and every incident, is embraced. So it's not that tough a sell to get people to come to the table. Sometimes it's difficult in terms of scheduling and timing and all that, but generally speaking, people accept the reality and the importance of doing those reviews and improving from them. Thank you.
Again, I want to prolong the meeting, but I want to shift it from fire, police. I know our human resources department does a great job through Laurel, do a great job in assessing near misses within our organization and bringing people together. Near misses or things that they think they could have done well. Our folks have participated in those. I say our folks, fire has kind of gone into a transportation environment review and been that third party set of eyes. So I think the organization has, again, we're not talking about an organization that has great laps. We're just talking about stepping to the next level.
Thank you very much, Chief. Any other questions from the committee? With that, I'll ask for a motion to accept staff's recommendation. Mayor Reardon, second by Councillor Stewart. And all in favor? That passes unanimously. I'm going to move on to item 3.2, Municipal Emergency Response Plan.
I can introduce the next speaker. Okay, so the next speaker on the emergency response plan, and just as a bit of a backdrop, the emergency response plan, we've been operating with this plan probably since the spring of 2015. We were in transition during 2018, I apologize. We were in a transition, and again, it's a substantial document. I really think this is a watershed moment, and it's going to be presented by Deputy Mike Carr. Deputy Mike Carr completed a master's in disaster emergency management at Royal Roads University. He provides guidance and direction to Platoon 1 and 3 within our fire operations and is responsible for managerial direction to fire prevention and investigation. He was responsible on a daily basis for St. John EMO and developing staff competence, which at this time was well over 105, 110 people that we can put into an emergency operations theater. He's performed numerous command and general staff roles at St. John EMO, and he has 26 years. We've been fortunate to have him for 26 years. Without further ado, Deputy Carr.
Thanks, Chief.
Chairperson Hickey and members of the Public Safety Committee, Mike Carr, and also as the Chief mentioned, my background as a manager with the City of St. John primarily is as the Director of EMO. There's a big joke going around because since I started that position is when things started to go sideways in the City of St. John. But I'd like to take this opportunity to also thank Jean Chowan. For those that know her, she's a pivotal part of our EMO team. She is the MERP document administrator, and I just wanted to recognize her for her work on this project. So as mentioned in my St. John EMO overview during the council orientation, there are many plans and regulations and standards that are applicable to emergency management organizations. In saying that, I'd like to provide a brief context on the development and management of the Municipal Emergency Response Plan, who I might refer to as the MERP on several things. We absolutely like our acronyms in the in emergency services. So for context, each municipality is responsible under the New Brunswick Emergency Measures Act to develop emergency response plans. Our emergency measures bylaw also stipulates this mandate. However, one of the challenges of the MERPs is that there's little guidance on what is actually contained inside the document. Most MERPs contain all sorts of information that may be applicable, but it's usually not standardized or actually useful during emergencies. Therefore, St. John EMO chose to use the same format as the Regional Emergency Response Plan used by NBEMO. This promotes interoperability, common language, and a document that can be utilized during emergencies. Our format uses the latest CSA standards, as the Chief mentioned, and best practices to ensure compliance, but also functionality. And further to that, what is unique within our Municipal Emergency Response Plan is the incorporation of the incident command system to match our operational format that uses an all hazards approach, allowing us to be prepared for any emergency. So let's define what an MERP is. It's any plan, program, or procedure prepared by a municipality that is intended to mitigate the effects of an emergency or disaster and to provide for the safety, health, and welfare of the civil population and the protection of property, the environment, in the event of such occurrence. Now, in the next few slides, we'll review the purpose and scope of the MERP, as well as St. John EMO's vision and mission that guides our development now and future revisions that may occur. The purpose of the MERP is to outline procedures to be followed by local government to provide a prompt and coordinated response to any emergency and activities that support emergency preparedness. The MERP addresses incidents that may cause damage of a magnitude warranting the activation of our Emergency Operations Center. The scope of this plan includes officials and staff of the municipality of St. John and assisting agencies within the city boundaries. It also provides for support of neighboring jurisdictions under provincial or federal authority if called upon to do so. The MERP does not address emergencies that are normally handled at the scene by the appropriate first responding agencies. The vision of the St. John Emergency Management Organization is for St. John to be disaster resilient and sustainable community in which private and corporate citizens collaborate with the St. John EMO to cultivate and sustain an effective community-based emergency preparedness culture. And our mission is to develop, implement, and maintain a highly effective emergency management program that takes an all-hazard ICS-based approach to emergencies while promoting continuous improvement through an ongoing education and review. Now, it is a 70-some page document with multiple appendices, so I'm just going to breeze over it really quickly. But I just wanted to give everybody the overview of how it is organized, and we will be doing an educational program for this, which I'll mention later on. The MERP document is organized under 3 broad headings that are color-coded for easy reference. There's general information, hazard identification and risk assessments with response actions, and roles and responsibilities during activation. The general information section provides background on authority, graduated response, cooperating agencies, and planning and administration of St. John EMO. This section is not usually utilized during emergencies, but is accessible for reference, and it is a great training tool. The hazard identification and risk assessment section, HIRA, rates a list of 30 identified risks in the community based on likelihood, consequence, total risk score, and risk category. And this allows us to prioritize our numerous hazards within the community. The model of HIRA we adopted for this, I was going to say MERP, but we're getting a little carried away with the acronyms. The Municipal Emergency Response Plan is in alignment with the Public Safety Canada. It's also used by the Ontario Office of the Fire Marshal, Ontario Emergency Management Organization. And we thought this model was appropriate because of the use of 10 specific criteria for consequence that considers everything from life safety to social, economic, and even reputational impacts. During its annual review, I anticipate that this section will be enhanced as new hazards become apparent and our protocols on response changes. This is an example of our flood hazard sheet, one of the 30 hazards identified, something this community is very familiar with. Interesting, you'll notice that you may not be able to see it from here, but the risk rating is only moderate for flood. And that is because the frequency of flooding over a 10-year period is only probable. But the consequence rating was mostly medium, as impacts are very disrupting to the community, but not usually life-threatening, and the availability of resources for recovery are in place. The roles and responsibilities section explains the activation levels and the process for using ICS, and the roles and responsibilities of the municipality, St. John EMO, our Emergency Operations Center, the Regional Emergency Operations Center, and other responding agencies. The advantage of this section is the use of the ICS structure, which is applicable for all emergencies and can be structured to meet the needs for specific situations. All of our St. John EMO training uses ICS Canada methodology, which is recognized across North America. We can apply ICS to any event regardless of whether we have experience with that hazard or not. And during the spring freshet flood of 2018, we were honored to have Canadian Task Force 2 team from Calgary to come in to give us a hand. They were seamlessly incorporated themselves into our operations center. And lastly, there are a number of appendices, which include the Declaration of State of Local Emergency template, something that you want to have at the ready, critical infrastructure activation timeline, and the planning P, which I've chosen as our example, which is the process we use from a moment an emergency occurs to the multiple cycles used to manage the event. This is emphasized and taught during ICS training, and we have used this model for our recent flood events, the pandemic, and the cyber attack. So the next steps for us at St. John EMO is to train all St. John EMO members and supervisory staff of the MERP. We will continue ICS training for St. John EMO members to build depth and response. We will apply continuous improvement philosophy through after-action reviews to update the MERP, and we will revise it annually. So it is recommended that the Public Safety Committee recommends to Common Council that Common Council adopt the Municipal Emergency Response Plan attached to this report and developed in accordance with the Provincial Emergency Measures Act and the St. John Emergency Measures Bylaw. And thank you, and I'll open for any questions.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chief. I'll extend it to members of committee with any questions. Mayor Reardon.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. I do have a quick comment. You mentioned it's 72 pages, and just for the public's information as well, that most of those pages also have additional information at the foot of them if you want to click onto it, which I didn't do because this kid is fairly hefty. But I did really, I liked this because it covers everything from bridges and engineering failures to floods to erosion. I mean, there's everything you could think of, everything I could think of at least in the kit. So I found it very comprehensive and very informative, I guess, for me, sitting on council to understand the scope, like I said, of what's covered in it. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Going to pass it over to Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Carr. Great presentation. I'm just curious, if I'm correct, you said there was 105 active firefighters in the EMO. Is that correct?
Through the chairperson, through you, Councillor. No, we have 105 St. John EMO members or staff members that are trained trained in the ICS system. And within the ICS system, there's multiple levels and there's specialty levels, but we've had multiple deliveries and a great commitment by all staff members from all the different departments within the city.
Okay, and what kind of training would they go through?
Well, actually, through the chairperson, there's actually a ICS 4 or 2 for executive members like Public Safety Committee members that we would love to present to you at an opportunity.
Good.
But no, it's basically it starts off with just basic terminology. And what we like to do is, depending on your position in EMO or within your actual department, you know, I think it's good for everybody to have the entry level just for awareness of terminology and whatnot. But I believe that once you're into the emergency operations center level, a majority of our staff and Tim's staff and Laurel, like they all have up to the ICS 300 level, which is the second. And then anybody who's dealing with provincial agencies will go to the 400 level. And then we have a number of staff that have actually gone and got trained specifically on the different specific roles within the ICS structure on top of that. So we've had excellent buy-in, and and I guess what the ability is, and I just sorry, Chief, to mention Chief Bruce, coming from Ontario, we would be using exactly the same format, the same structure. And we actually be able to share our plans and proper terminology and just have that interoperability, especially with our neighboring provinces.
Very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stewart. Any other? I'll pass it over to City Manager.
Mr. Chair, first of all, I really wish your worship would not have said that the plan covers all possibilities, because that just sounds like a challenge to the acts of God that face us. But I want to combine that comment with Councillor Stewart's question about training. There's an old adage, a plan never survives first contact. I think one of the very powerful things within ICS and the training around ICS and the mindset that is established is this notion of flexibility. Have your standing operating procedures in place, know the functions, know who's responsible for what, and that way you are far better set to respond to the unknown or the unanticipated. So the plan is incredibly important because it sets the groundwork, but we have to be ready to respond to anything that may not actually fit within that plan. And that is the beauty of the training that goes on and the familiarity with the system. So 105 employees of the City of St. John trained in the emergency management organization construct sounds like a good number. We want that number higher. That way we have the depth, and when you're doing a flood event that lasts many weeks, you can rotate people in and out and have a bit better of a rhythm within that entire organization. But the more people we get trained on it, the more flexibility we have in the system moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Any other questions from committee? All right. Thank you very much, Chief and or Deputy Chief Sakar. Sorry. Without a doubt, I mean, this was not a simple task putting this together. It's a monumental document, and it's gonna make a huge difference in formalizing and enhancing our already world-class emergency measures operations. So thank you very much.
I could introduce
Yeah,
Rob.
yeah, of course. And on to the next item. Oh, yes, we do. Thank you very much. Now I'm looking for a motion to accept staff's recommendation. Mayor Reardon, Councillor Stewart, all in favor? Great. I'm going to pass it off to the chief for item 3.3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, we're going to be asking Rob Nickel to give us an update on our emergency simulation theater. And again, this may seem like a little bit too much, but this simulation theater is a real deal with respect to making our community safer. It's one of a kind. We're told that the only one in the Eastern Seaboard is New York City, but it doesn't matter. It's the only one in New Brunswick, and it's going to make us a whole lot better. So we think it's important. And again, we've been delayed as a result of COVID. So Deputy Nickel is here today to tell you where we are. And again, a whole lot of the planning piece and a whole lot of the emergency preparation and all of those things are going to be enriched by what the simulator brings. So a little bit about Deputy Nickel. Deputy Nickel is currently completing a Master's of Industrial Relations at Queen's University. He was one of literally 20 of 200 people that were able to get in. He provides guidance and direction to Platoon 2 and 4 within fire operations, and is responsible for managing and directing the fire training division. He's part of the city's negotiating team. He has performed numerous command and general staff roles, planning section chief, the incident commander within the St. John EMO structure, and assists Deputy Carr in developing St. John EMO staff competence. Deputy Nickel has 24 years with the city. Deputy Nickel.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, Chairperson Hickey and members of the Public Safety Committee. My name is Rob Nickel, and as the Chief mentioned, I'm a Deputy Chief with the St. John Fire Department. Before I begin, I just wanted to give a little context on the comment about Mike's track record as emergency manager. It was actually on his first day of EMO that there was, I believe it was a local state of emergency was declared because it snowed for about 7 days straight. It's not changed since then. We've had lots of other natural disasters. In fact, he's the only one I know that looks at the Weather Network not for planning nice days, but it's for the next natural disaster that we should be prepared for. He's a good guy to have in our emergency management operation. The purpose of this presentation, however, is to provide you a brief overview of the nearly completed emergency planning, preparation, and response testing simulation theater. I will briefly cover why emergency response training is important, why the simulation theater, where is it located, where do we put fire prevention when we kick them out, who will use the simulation theater. I'll also give you some timelines on the progress and our projected go-live date. I'll speak on the sustainability of the technology, and finally I'll open the floor to any questions that you might have. Routine emergency response training is critical, and it's critical to maintain and improve the skills and the confidence of both the responders and the commanding officers. As I'm sure you're all aware, St. John has a diverse history of emergency incidents, both natural disasters and industry related. Examples can include our flash flooding, spring freshets, refinery explosions, natural gas leaks, hurricanes, just to name a few. We must also be prepared to respond to threats due to human behavior. St. John's unique industrial hazard risk profile requires a competence in a variety of fields. We have nuclear, natural gas, oil, electric, water hazards, rail hazards, and many pulp and paper mills, all within the city boundaries or very close. In fact, when away on command or firefighting courses, many people are skeptical that I'm embellishing the incidents and hazards that are present in the city of St. John. It isn't until they Google the city and realize that what we talk about is actually our reality. So why a simulation theater? The simulation theater puts the heat on the responders and the command officers. The participants are immersed in an emergency incident environment that mimics reality. The simulation theater incorporates artificial intelligence to provide realistic consequences to the decisions that are made by the participants as they proceed through the scenario. Participants see exactly what happens at an incident based on how they respond and try to mitigate that incident. The simulation theater also helps to decrease the cost to train, as it is virtual and not in the field, less logistics. It increases the learning retention and on-scene performance, and that's due more just to the frequency with which you can train in a virtual environment compared to being out in the field. Reduces our safety concerns for trainees, staff, and environment. It also creates realistic scenarios based on the actual layout of buildings or industrial sites. The simulation theater actually has the capacity to be catered to exactly individual sites. One that we've got built in was the city market, but there is capacity to add others as well and to add that artificial intelligence based on the needs of industry or other areas. It has structured and objective-based assessment capabilities that can be changed depending on the needs of the person that is going through that training. And as I mentioned before, it increases the efficiency of training because it's so much easier to run people through a virtual environment than it is out in the field. The next slides are just a couple of pictures of the simulator itself. The theater is located at number 1 fire station, and it's adjacent to the EMO boardroom in the former fire prevention and investigation space. During an EMO activation, the space can be utilized as additional breakout space for the ICS team. The rooms are connected by closed circuit cameras so that participants can be observed while training as well. I'll just show another picture here of the actual simulation theater. Fire prevention. So as a result of the renovations, and there was a bit of an analysis done on where the best spot to have the simulation theater would be, it was determined that it would be appropriate to have it adjacent to the EMO boardroom. And as a result, fire prevention was relocated. They were relocated to another fire station on the east side of the city, number 4 fire station on Courtney Avenue. The fire prevention division is relocated to Courtney Avenue on the east side. And one of the major advantages of that is that it now has a public-facing location that meets the current and future needs of the division, and is also easily accessible to all who would need their services. And just another picture of the fire prevention office. So who will use the simulation theater? Is this just a St. John Fire Department thing? And the answer is no. Certainly the city fire emergency management services will make a great deal of use out of the simulation theater. It'd be very important for promotional processes and command officer professional development. Also very important for St. John Police. They can do active shooter, public order simulations. As Deputy Carr mentioned, it's very helpful in the ICS training and making sure that we're able to practice and actually get our confidence in the ICS structure and commanding serious events. Also certainly available for neighboring fire and EMO services, Grand Bay, KV, all those different agencies would certainly be able to utilize the technology and the training that's provided there. Another opportunity would be local industry. I believe the chief mentioned there's been a change in regulations, E2 regulations, and there's a responsibility of industry to practice, plan, and assess their emergency response plans. And the simulation theater is an ideal opportunity to do that in a virtual environment where you can see what happens at a refinery or a pulp mill, something like that. And also any other emergency response agency requiring training or validation of their emergency response plans. A little bit on the timelines for the simulation theater. As the chief mentioned, there were some delays due to the COVID-19 and the travel restrictions. So it wasn't as quick as we had hoped, but now everything has kind of fallen into place, and fingers crossed, we have the week of September 13th blocked off for the installation of the simulator. Following that, the week of September 20th will be the in-service training for staff that will be utilizing the simulation theater on a go-forward basis. Once the official training is done, certainly there'll be some getting up to speed and developing some curriculum. And our go-live date for the simulator theater is projected to be October 18th, 2021. As mentioned earlier, the simulator actually has built into it the blue plans of the city market. You can actually go through, it's like almost like a video game where you can actually feel like you're walking right through the city market. And our intent is to have one of our first postulated incidents using the city market. Just a little bit on the sustainability of the technology. The total simulation theater project, including the fire prevention relocation, is estimated to be roughly $603,000. Over the life of the current MB Power, or the Point Lepreau Nuclear Generating Station Agreement, and specifically the new annual response training fee of $64,000, the city's cost of relocating fire prevention, renovating the simulation theater, and acquiring the ADAM simulation technology will be covered. We're currently in the second year of a 10-year contract with MB Power. As I conclude this presentation, I want to remind the committee that the recommendation for this report is to receive and file. I'll certainly entertain any questions that you might have about the simulation theater. Try my best to answer.
Thank you very much. Now extending any questions to the committee to Deputy Chief Nicol. Mayor Reardon.
Thank you. Deputy Chief, when you say go live, does that mean that it will be accessible to all of the groups that you mentioned initially?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Okay,
thank you. And is there if another group wanted to access it, what would be the process of that? I'm just curious as to how, like I know you mentioned some groups, if there would be anything else that could come on board or whatever going forward. It sounds like it's going to be a very interesting tool.
Yes, through you, Chairperson, to Your Worship. Yeah, there's lots of opportunity, and we would have to, I would suggest we probably do that through Jean Chown. We do a lot of the coordination of the scheduling of that piece.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I think
If I could add to, Mr. Chairman, to the mayor, it's certainly a fee for service opportunity. Substantial. I mean, again, this isn't something that comes cheap. Most industries, most organizations have a training, have an emergency preparedness budget, and we've received a number of calls and shamefully have been promoting the use of the simulator, and it'll help us, particularly if the person who wants to exercise their plan resides within St. John, it'll help us be better prepared as well. But certainly, one of the visions is that it will generate, we put a very early figure of approximately $100,000 a year.
Chief, any other questions from committee? Thank you, Mayor. Moved by the Mayor, seconder, Councillor Stewart. Looks like we're on a roll here. Thank you very much, Deputy Chief Nicol. I had the chance to tour the simulation theater yesterday, and it is an impressive facility. It'll be a nice addition to, especially with the risk profile of our city. It'll be so I'm sure, a welcome addition to our fire response and EMO as well. Thanks. All in favor? And moving to 3.4, recognition, observations, and continuous improvement. Over to the chief.
Mr. Chair, before the chief says anything, and he doesn't know I'm going to do this, I think it is appropriate for me to make a few comments. I've mentioned this in council before, but this is the inaugural meeting of the Public Safety Committee, so I'd like to mention it again. Based on my career, I have been involved in countless situations, both at home and abroad, where we are in an emergency mode. And obviously, I've watched firsthand the response to those emergencies, be it floods, fires, ice storms in Canada, military support to the G8 and G20 summit, or combat and humanitarian assistance operations in Bosnia and Afghanistan. So I've seen my share of command and control organizations, and our emergency management organization is exactly that, a command and control organization. And I've seen my share of first responders. I simply need to say to this Public Safety Committee, and I've said it to council and I've said it publicly, that this city is blessed with an emergency response organization that, quite frankly, does not take second place to any other municipality that I know of in this country, and quite frankly could hold its own, I am confident, in any emergency situation. And here I'm not just referring to the Emergency Operations Center. I am also referring to our first responders, our fire department, our police department, public works, our water crews, etc. All those who are out there doing the business. The city of St. John is extremely well served by its emergency response capability, and I can say that with hand on heart. And with that, I'll hand over to the fire chief. Thank you.
Comments, city manager, and we need to live up to those and continue to aspire to be better. In saying that, Mr. City Manager, and I know you won't mind me saying this, what has been very heartwarming to me is to see the talent across our organization. I look at Tim O'Reilly, I look at Stephanie Hosik and her team. St. John EMO is not fire. I mean, again, sometimes I'm embarrassed to wear a uniform, and I don't mean it negatively. We're not, St. John EMO is not fire. Fire is part of St. John EMO. Police is part of St. John EMO. Our human resources, our transportation environment, our engineers, our team down at the Ross Avenue. It's having the ability to mobilize those skill sets in the ICS structure. So again, we looked at the agenda tonight, and it's heavy. It's heavy EMO, and it's heavy, and the agendas will change. The inventory and the playlist of folks that we have in this organization and their desire to be part of it is the reason we have the opportunity to execute like we do. I think the difference is when you're in an emergency environment, there's very little red tape. There's very little process. When you're in an emergency environment, if given the tools, you have the choice to make decisions. Now, granted, if you make the wrong decisions, you're going to wear them big time, but you have the ability to create a plan and execute on that plan in the same 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And that isn't really what happens day to day in any type of operation. So there are a whole lot of people at City St. John that like working in that environment. So we're grateful for the team. So my second time up here is a bit of that recognition. And maybe that's why the city manager decided to make note there. It is speaking about the team. We're going to provide you some backdrop on our development, on our growth through observations and our commitment to continuous improvement. Let me just find the... So recently, the federal government has notified a group of us that we will be recognized for excellence in EMO. And I got to tell you, it's more important for me that we're getting it from our city manager and the team here. We're gonna talk about the observations. Oops, thank you. Yeah, if you want to help, Dep, you're welcome to. This wouldn't happen to Tim, would it? There we go. Thank you. So we're going to talk about, the reason we've been recognized is based on performance over the last 3 to 5 years. Part of that performance and part of that growth occurred at a butane leak that happened in East St. John. And I think when we go through those observations and you see the level of detail that we've took and in analyzing ourselves and taking a look at ourselves, even though the incident went very well. Remember, nobody was hurt. Everybody was returned home. We stabilized the incident. We did the right things in the early moments of that incident. But we were bold enough not to wipe our brow and say we got away with another one. We were bold enough to step back and say, let's have a look at this thing. Let's have a look at this thing, and could we have been better? So on Monday, June 21st, 20 members of your St. John EMO team received a significant and prestigious recognition of excellence from the federal government by email correspondence stating that on behalf of the federal, provincial, and territorial senior officials responsible for emergency management, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a recipient of the Emergency Management Exemplary Service Awards. That's 20 members of your team that come from everything from fire, police, municipal operations, and again, right across our board. I don't even know that the feds have announced that officially yet. They have basically sent us an email and looked for approval to use our names. So the path to that performance and that excellence, and again, we're not going to rest on our laurels, but our path to that is got a tremendous history, bad history, but it's a tremendous history experience with respect to responding to floods, explosions, snowstorms. And in 2015, we decided, again, the incident management system that we were using, which was sufficient. You got to remember the 2015 snowstorm, the editorial in the Telegraph Journal said City Hall handled the snow event well. And we all understand how often those creds are posted. So we certainly got the acknowledgement using a former system. But we understood that we needed to be better. Deputy Mike Carr traveled across Canada to look at the industrial municipal interface of how does other communities deal with having industries nearby, most of them on their perimeter, on their border, not necessarily in the heart of their city. We came up with a community awareness and emergency response program. And at that time, we determined that we wanted to move to the ISIS emergency management model. Further to the background, so as we were changing our operational model, we have the Butane Incident in January 2018. Again, I have to emphasize because I'm going to go through 9 observations and I can just see the headlines tomorrow. The management of the butane leak was a success. The Energy Utilities Board said it in their final concluding report, and numerous other people have said it. But that incident accelerated our growth. It accelerated our growth tremendously. It was like, and I know Councillor Ogden would appreciate this, it was like practicing on the goal line all week long and then in a game having to be on the goal line. That's what happened to us in January 2018, because in April of 2018, we had the largest flood in the history of the city of St. John. And we mobilized without a hitch. I remember the very first morning, it was all about getting the structure together, understanding the P-post, understanding who was going to do what, and getting people like Tim O'Reilly and Jeff Hussey and folks that weren't firefighters, and other police officers, Jim Fleming, getting those people involved. So it was a success, but there was, as we look back, and I'll give you some background, I was in Halifax for the first 3 days of that incident. I had a sense that there was something not working right. Nothing major. I mean, I had the manager of the industrial facility call me directly, and his request wasn't making it to the incident command post. So there's something wrong when the manager of the involved industrial facility couldn't get a request into the command post. So obviously there were some pieces there that we had to examine, and we have. So what follows is those observations. There was some organizational challenges, and some of it was related to us transitioning. And anytime you transition from one point to the next point, you're going to have a growth phase. You're going to have a little bit of an exposure again. So there was some organizational structure challenges. Having said that, none of this had any impact on the citizens or public safety. Those things were dealt with. ICS, our emergency management model, has been fully adopted at this point, 3 months later. And we have over 100 personnel. And again, I think the number is exactly 105 across our organization, not just fire uniforms. And we've had successful activations using the ICS model throughout. I was particularly pleased, and I probably make the point later on, when City Manager Collin, at the early stages of the pandemic, I expected to be activated during the pandemic, and I think some of you can remember those regimented reports that we stood before council for the first 2 weeks. And it was all about explaining to our community and giving our community confidence that the municipality was doing things in a manner that they could best possibly protect our citizens. We weren't going to make the pandemic go away, because we still haven't. But we gave the community confidence. And I read something, I don't read much of the stuff that's online and the social media, but there was a lot of very positive things as a result of our command staff and our operational staff providing those briefs. And it was, you know, again, I was very proud to see those folks go up. And I was surprised to see the city manager, and I understand why. He activated us in the early stages. He activated us and he put us right beside him up in City Hall in the early stages of the cyber attack. And the reason being was there was an incredible team there working away at a magnitude of problems, but they had all kinds of stuff coming at them. And what we had to do is we had to take the stuff off their plate. We had to take stuff around food and bathrooms and access to this place and access to that place. And we had to take stuff like resources. We had to take that off their plate so they could deal with the cyber attack. So the city manager in his wisdom said, Chief, get your team up here. We even brought our signs. We even brought our P-post signs and our smart objectives. We even brought the stuff that created the environment so everybody could see we meant business. So we are ready to mobilize. And you're right. You're right, Mr. City Manager. We've identified 30 hazards, and I think the mayor may have cursed us. We're probably going to find 31 through 35 in 2022. But we'll get the plans together. So we've had a lot of success. And so we openly say, yeah, there were some problems. There's some problems around organizational structure during the Butane incident. We had challenges in the early stages of relocating residents. Obviously, you evacuate residents. We evacuated 84 residents. And typically when we have a structure fire, we have to move residents away from where they are. We put them on a bus and we find a way. We get Red Cross helps us. And we find a way where whether we have temporary shelter, we can get them to. Anyway, there was a bit of an issue. So fortunately, the involved industry got involved and we found a home for them. We found a long-term or at least a week-long home at the Hampton Inn. And it was resolved through collaboration. The ICS system that we have now identifies emergency social services as a critical component of the emergency management structure. And we've mobilized it many times. And again, I apologize, Deputy Carr would know better than me. I think Greg Cutler is still involved in the emergency social services. And again, you want to talk, and somebody mentioned Greg the other day, you want to talk about a champion and a person that knows how to get things done. So Greg Cutler is a lead on that. And you want to put 80 people somewhere, Greg has a list of where we can put them. Observations, the municipal response plan, shamefully, was still in draft because we knew where we were transitioning from the IMS model to the ICS model. We knew that these scenarios and the 30 or 28 scenarios that were in the document didn't quite fit our community. So we were in transition. And so our observation was we need to get that fixed. We need to get the written document. Even though we were operating using the new model, we need to get the written document. So today, we've got the recommend document. And thank you, council, or thank you, committee, for agreeing to take forward the new municipal emergency response plan document. I will guess that numerous communities will be looking to get a copy of it. And we have demonstrated excellence in utilizing the new municipal emergency response plan in the ICS model. And, again, we've been honest in presenting the idea of care, community awareness, emergency response. We said, again, we've got a pretty good relationship, and it's getting better. In the desire, for continuous improvement and high reliability organizations, we still think we need to be better. And so we've said, city and industry, not any one particular industry, need to have a better collaboration. We believe that the E2 requirements under the new federal regulations are going to cause some of that. We believe our emergency management simulation theater is going to cause some of that. We're not about blame or fault. We're about finding solutions and getting better. Any of the deficiencies on the disconnect while we were at the scene did not impact the residents. Remember, we got the residents out of those sites. They were repositioned at Hampton Inn, treated very well by both the industry and the city at the Hampton Inn, and they were put back there and they were returned to their homes safely. And the incident didn't get any worse after that Monday morning. The CARE initiative, as I said, E2 regulations, the theater itself, and again, thank you, council, because I know that was a stretch going to council, and I remember Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Norton and I, after council had approved the simulation theater, having a conversation. That was a stretch for council in a time of austerity. That was a stretch, so thank you for receiving that position, that it was a needed requirement, and trusting us with that. The on-site command post, which is really what we do, is we move a mobile trailer, to the location of the incident. The on-site command post was congested and ineffective at times. And the reason being is everything was fostered, whether it was food, bathrooms, or keys, everything was going to the on-site command post. So that has all changed under the ICS model. Some of the equipment sets, whether it's gas detection equipment, there was an incompatibility issue. And again, back to Councillor Ogden, if you don't have the right equipment, and if some of your guys are wearing a bike helmet and somebody else is wearing a Rydell helmet, you know what type of problems you can have there, and that's just even on names. So council approved. Recently, council approved us moving to a better equipment set, an equipment set that aligns on gas detection, that aligns with industry. The media were frustrated that we weren't giving more briefs on a daily basis. And we had one person who worked tirelessly, who needs to be commended. And again, the same person was doing the communications on a daily basis with the displaced residents. We met with the media. And in the following spring, the spring incident with the flood, we received good comments from the media with respect to our engagement. So we learned from that. The evacuated residents provided some positive feedback from the standpoint of us understanding, did they have a 72-hour kit? Most of them, no. And were they aware of emergency notification? Most of them, no. So it certainly gave us information to basically focus on moving forward. Today we have a user-friendly registration process for notification. And we reminded citizens that the first line of preparation is at the citizen level. And this one, the observation is really, we had a lot of people do a lot of great work. We carried a couple of the citizens away from their homes to the staging area. We went back at pets, we went back at medicine. We had 3 briefings a day at the hotels. There was trusting relationships. I think Deputy Carr still gets calls from some of the folks that were displaced. A large percentage of the displaced residents, and I say very large percentage of the displaced residents, were very satisfied with St. John Emo communication efforts. And a large percentage provided excellent when asked to rate the Hampton Inn experience. And that's where they were isolated and located for a week. So in summary, acting on the lessons learned, knowing that it wasn't perfect, allowed us to be better in the upcoming flood. We've been activated numerous times, and I would suggest that every time since that day when we activate, we're better than the time before. And again, if you've heard me say anything, it's about being better today than yesterday and better tomorrow than today. We're prepared to utilize the ICS structure for any type of emergency. So those ones that we forgot, Your Worship, will be prepared. And the problems priorities, the P-post. In our office, you'll often hear us say P-post it, because that's the way we identify our problems, priorities, objectives, strategies, and tactics. Let's P-post the issue. And again, one of the beauties of emergency response and being in this environment is you can act pretty fast. So I think that's practically it. There is no really resolution other than receive, and would like to take the same document to Common Council, just so that, again, we've been very forthcoming on the observations on the Butane incident, and a number of our community, and I know a number of our councillors have been pressed on that. So we've used that as a tool to celebrate our success in the recognition that 20 of our members are going to be announced for exceptional service. But if you have any questions, I can certainly take them at this time.
Thank you, Chief. Going to open up to questions from committee members. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Chief. Just perhaps an ask as this goes before council, and you do a very good job of the qualitative data in here, a whole lot of detail. I can see that a lot of time and energy was spent analyzing how to get better even after a successful operation. One of the pieces for me is the quantitative data. Your team has alluded to a number, the Snowmageddon, flood number 1, flood number 2. I would love to see a table of how often our EMO has been stood up, and I think that would be very good information to share, that this isn't something that our community has that sits there just in case. It's been bang, bang, bang. I would love to see that quantitative data. I think that would really support and enrich the information. So, but fully supportive of taking this forward. Good work.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll certainly provide that.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Any other questions? Looking for a motion to receive for information. And take it to council.
So at this time, I want to the next presentation, the final presentation, and I'm sorry that I'm long-winded at times. I don't get up here often. So the next presentation is with respect to a question that many of you have had around speed control, speed limits. And again, I'm glad that we've got this diversity, a little bit of this diversity today. And I couldn't be more pleased that Tim O'Reilly is here with us today. Tim is currently the Director of Parks and Recreation for the city, transitioning to Director of Public Works this fall. He has been with the city for 17 years. He's held different engineering and operational roles during his time in various parts of the public works and transportation. He's a professional engineer and holds both a bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering from the University of New Brunswick. Despite advancing in roles a few times with the city, he has consistently been our traffic engineer since 2008. He will be speaking in this capacity of traffic engineer through his presentation. And again, I think Tim has a brilliant mind and has that lens on our community safety overall. So, Tim?
After that introduction, if Tim can get his newfound ego up to the podium there, I just need a quick vote on the last.
Tim, I apologize for leaving the same state I was in. So.
Thank you very much, Chief. I need a vote on the last item. Just all those in favor. And none opposed. Motion carries. And moving on to our last agenda item, 3.5. Over to you, Tim.
Well, good afternoon, Chairperson and committee. As the Chief said, I'm very excited to be part of this committee. I'm hoping to provide a bit of a different perspective on the notion of public safety. Over the subsequent meetings, I hope to provide different reports to this committee on the topic of road safety. For today's agenda, I'm going to talk specifically about vehicle traffic management within the City of St. John. The city receives annually around 20 requests to slow vehicles down on our streets. These requests have increased to around 60 within the past 6 months or so of this year. Most of these requests are received from citizens with a genuine concern for safety of themselves, or in most cases, actually those around them, including family members. Committee, this presentation is bringing up to speed on how city staff continues to work to make best use of the resources available, provide good customer service response to all those concerns we receive, to address highest priority speeding issues by using a range of strategies, and to just as importantly identify how us as city staff can reach out to this committee and obtain your leadership as we continue to try to find the best fit for the service going forward within the municipality. Let me first start by talking about what the law says about speeding. And this all comes from the Motor Vehicle Act within the province of New Brunswick. One of the signs of a good transportation system is predictability. This allows motorists and other roadway users to focus on fewer unpredictable components of a transportation system, because obviously those come up from time to time. The default speed limit for municipal roads within the entire province is generally 50 kilometers per hour. School zones within municipalities is 30 kilometers per hour as the default. It is also law in this province that motorists must adjust their speeds for unique hazards or conditions that present themselves. So it best can be described as those speed limits, whether it's a default or one defined by municipal council, are for ideal conditions. And it is a requirement that motorists must adjust their speed for anything that might be unique, low light conditions, snow conditions, etc. Motorists understanding compliance with these various laws can go a long way to ensure safe speeds are used. If you think about it, if everybody followed the speed limits, we would have a lot of issue with speeding within the municipality. All that being said, municipal councils have the ability to create new speed limits for municipal street through a bylaw. The province has the ability to change speeds on provincial highways. In many cases, when we receive community concerns about speeding, a request to lower the speed limit for a street is often one of, or the primary suggestions made by the community member that give us a call. City staff consistently use recognized national best practices to evaluate the speed limit we receive when we receive a request to lower a speed limit. It is widely recognized that the road itself will tell somebody how fast they should be driving. Presence of consistent risks such as curves or hills that obstruct sightlines, intersections and driveways that create those collision points with other roadway users, levels of other traffic on a roadway, and that includes pedestrian and vehicle traffic, as well as the condition and width of the road itself, all go into identifying for the reasonable driver how fast they should be driving. The best practices that city staff use to evaluate the best speed limit for a street use these factors in a formula to establish, again, that appropriate speed limit based on the physical characteristics of the street. Again, ultimately, it is common council in the case of city streets in the province, in the case of provincial highways, to decide if something beyond those default speed limits should be applied for a particular street. It is certainly intuitive to think that simply lowering a speed limit for a street will reduce speeding. Although a posted sign on a street with a lower speed limit is likely to influence lower speeds, city staff have consistently cautioned against doing so without at least the application of these best practices. City staff's approach was independently confirmed as part of the development of the city's new transportation plan, Move SJ, that was actually completed as part of phase 1 of that transportation plan. Recognizing that the physical characteristics of a road most influence a motorist's operating speed, simply lowering the speed limit without adjusting these physical characteristics will likely not all of a sudden create compliance with those lower speed limits. That can result in the creation of new problems, as detailed in our staff report. use of best practices to determine speed limits, and reviewing the need to adjust physical characteristics through a traffic calming plan, which I'll talk about a bit later in my presentation, have therefore remained city staff's consistent approach for evaluating and bringing in recommendations back to Common Council with respect to vehicle speeds. The city has a traffic calming policy to determine when and how physical characteristics of a street should be changed when we receive community concerns about speeding. The policy is attached to our staff report and is available on our city website, so I won't go into detail in this presentation. However, on the screen are the essential components of that plan. And again, that plan's been in place since 2012. It was actually a city staff developed plan based on best practices for applications for St. John. As I mentioned at the start of the presentation, calls we receive from the community with concerns about speeding are genuine. I know because I speak to many of those people who call us, the parents, the grandparents, neighbors that are concerned about the speeds on their street. I also mentioned that many calls we receive each year go well beyond our ability to address these concerns. Again, we receive 20 to 60 requests, and we can deal with about 2 or 3 of those each year. The expectation of the city to address concerns about speeding in our community therefore needs to be managed. Whether a motorist is late for an appointment, is unaware of the speed limit for a street, or somebody doesn't believe the law applies to them, some speeding is going to happen on every street within St. John. I can tell you this because we conduct a lot of traffic speed surveys on different city streets in St. John. And since I've been doing those in 2008, I haven't found one situation where every single motorist has been below the speed limit. There's speeding that's going to occur, some of it high for sure, but definitely speeding. We have to recognize that that's going to happen. Therefore, our consistent approach has been to address speeding where a certain amount of that is actually occurring, to prioritize those issues based on a risk management approach, and to focus on traffic calming solutions that are documented to produce intended results, which is obviously to lower the speeds. I'll also quickly point out that we continue to work to provide better and better customer service to concerned citizens that have these issues brought forward to us. We sometimes address individual components of their concern. Sometimes it might be an issue with a need for a crosswalk. We'll address those sometimes separately than the overall issue about speeding. In other cases, we've purchased these couple of portable speed monitoring devices that we deploy where people call us with these concerns. Our recent presentation to Common Council for the plan for University Avenue is a good example of a holistic approach to making a street safer for everybody, which included both a traffic calming element as well as a recommended lower speed limit for that street. In recent years, the city's focus on traffic calming has been on streets around various elementary and middle schools within the city as part of an annual Safer School Zones program. This focus has been because of the greater community risk of the congregation of young pedestrians and people being dropped off in front of these elementary and middle schools. So that's been the focus since around 2014. At the end of this year, the program will be more than 75% complete because we do plan to complete these projects for every single elementary and middle school within the city of St. John. And after that program is complete, pending resource availability continues for traffic calming, we can focus more on other residential streets within the community based on the larger policy. In a future Public Safety Committee meeting, I'll be presenting our overall road safety strategy. For this presentation, I'll simply point out that our continued advancing approach to managing speeds in our community aligns very well with this overall strategy for improving safety on our streets. Again, I'm very excited to be part and help out with this committee as you do your work, and passionate about improving road safety within our community. As presented, we have an overall and evolving program to manage operating speeds in our community. Our report includes 5 different recommendations. Those 5 are up on the screen now, that if supported will allow this committee to continue to be a leader in continuously improving road safety within our community. With that, I'll turn it back to the committee chair for any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Director O'Reilly. City Manager, did you want to jump in?
Your Worship, Director O'Reilly spent a lot of time on 2 of the 3 E's. He did not touch significantly on the enforcement. I just want to share with this committee that I have had a discussion with the new police chief in that there seems to be heightened concern about people who are violating speed limits. And I have asked them, as per recommendation 4 on this chart, to take a look at some sort of speed enforcement blitz on a regular recurring basis moving forward in order to address those who would not respect the first 2 E's under education and the design of the streets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, City Manager. Open it up to committee questions, passing it over to Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Sullivan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just following up on the city manager's last point, and perhaps when we're having discussions with the province about various and sundry things, part of it could be returning some of the ticket revenue back to the St. John Police Commission, because, you know, at one point in time in history, I think, you know, traffic ticket revenue was shared between the province and the city, because the city pays for the police, the province pays for the justice system, and makes sure that it's shared, but it is no longer shared. So if the St. John Police Force is putting money into a blitz for neighborhoods to put tickets out for speeders, the expenses are the St. John Police Force and the revenue is the province of New Brunswick. So that would be very helpful in this situation. A couple of questions through you, Mr. Chair, to Tim. With your expertise, does lowering a speed limit in a neighborhood slow down the people who are speeding through the current speed limit?
It does have an effect on lowering the speed, usually from their current operating speed. So it does tend to have a positive impact. But like I say, because of the physical characteristics of the street, or the biggest influence, it's that has the greatest impact on lowering speeds. But yes, generally, if you lower speed limit, you'll have some influence generally on lower speeds.
Lower speeds overall, but that would make sense because people who are following the 50-kilometer limit will slow down to 40.
Exactly.
My question is, people who tend to drive 70 and 80 in a 50 zone, will they still drive 70 and 80 through a 40 zone?
Yes, because it's the physical characteristics of the street that most influence their speeds.
Okay, so
Regardless of that, at the end of the day, we still have a speeding problem, right?
we do have a speed. My wonder is, I know there's a whole book of how to solve it. I'm just wondering if lowering the speed limit doesn't punish the people who live in the neighborhood, but doesn't stop the people who are speeding. So I'm just throwing that. That's why I'm asking. You're the expert.
One of the things we're going to do, you'll see number 1, for example, we're going to proceed with assessing streets within St. John to find 40-kilometer-an-hour streets. As part of that program, we're actually going to do before and after speed assessments. So purely by lowering the speed limit doesn't have any influence on the speeds within St. John. But generally, best practice indicates that, again, it's that physical characteristic of the street that influences it. And if you just simply lower the speed limit without impacting the physical characteristics, you're going to continue to have speeding problems.
That makes 100% sense to me, Mr. Ally. That it's the physical piece, because my worry is if the only thing we do is lower speed limits, those who, the rule followers, will slow down and get frustrated because people will still be zipping by them at 70 clicks if we don't do those other things too. So I think that's important. My other question would be, when we do traffic speed studies, you know, maybe not now, but as we have our new web center rebuilding, is that part of our open data? Like when we do a traffic speed study, do we put that out there for people to see that their streets were studied and here's the information they got?
We don't put it as part of the open data set, but it's widely available data, which we can look at for the future in terms of the open data.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a good addition going forward. Thanks.
Good idea.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add Councillor Sullivan's first question. Tim addressed it from an engineering perspective. Just to share the second part of the conversation I had with the police chief, I asked him that very question, Councillor Sullivan, you know, does lowering speed limits normally lower the speed of those who would violate? And his answer was a categoric no, it does not. His experience as a police officer of many years is that a simple lowering of the speed limit does not accomplish anything to those who would violate the speed in the first place.
Thank you, City Manager. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Over to Mayor Reardon.
Thank you. I would reiterate what Councillor Sullivan says about trying to get a little bit of cash back from the province on that, because we do, there is a cost to the resource of it, of ticketing, and that really, I think, is probably one of the cheapest and best, most effective ways of controlling speeding. If you want to spend if you were getting some of the cash back to support your resources doing it, because tickets, nobody likes them. Road diets are a little more expensive. I do love them though. But one of the questions I was going to ask you is that with the Motor Vehicle Act, doesn't determine speed, it just says if you're, so we would determine the maximum speed, and okay, so I'm just trying to figure out how to get around that so we could get the cash. What about the heads-up display that a lot of cars have? Who's responsible for that? I noticed a discrepancy on my vehicle on Bayside. My heads-up says 60, the actual signs say 50, it's 40 during school, so like how do they get updated? And that's an educational piece if your vehicle has that, because you know you've always got it.
Yeah. I do know our own GIS department does keep that data updated, and once in a while comes back to me and says there's discrepancies between, you know, some of those commercial systems and what we have on the street. So, I mean, it's those independent companies that are responsible to update their data, but we do provide that information for those companies to use.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else was I going to mention there? And I'm happy to hear that we are considering a max of 40, you know, in neighborhoods, which would make sense, kilometers an hour. Now, with the provincial roads, we do have the authority, is that correct, to change the speeds?
No. So it is the province of New Brunswick that has the authority to change speed limits on a provincial highway.
If it is a provincial
If
highway?
it's a provincial highway, it's the province that has the authority to do it. We can make a recommendation, which we do at times, to the province, to their staff, but ultimately it is the province that decides the speed limits for provincial highways, whether it's Common Council that makes decisions on city streets.
Yeah, okay. And the other thing I was going to mention too is that with the reduced speeds, of course, I love to go back to the old physics, you know, force equals mass times acceleration. And so the amount of force applied to a human body will determine whether it survives or is killed. So I think, you know, reducing our speeds. And, you know, a lot of times we'll talk about parked cars, and sometimes I see those as traffic calming as well. You know, if in certain areas they do slow down drivers sometimes. So, and that's a cheap solution, is to increase parking if, you know, if it's allowable, for physically. That can also help as well. Anyways, thanks so much. I really appreciate this report, because we have had a lot of inquiries about it over the years. I find it is ramping up a little bit more right now because there's more interest in active transportation, people getting out walking and biking, et cetera. So as that increases, we'll probably hear more in regards to this. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Reardon. Over to Councillor Ogden.
Tim, is there much of a cost if we had an overall? I've met with 11 families on 11 different streets, and one of them told us that the city of Calgary just went to an overall drop to 40. Is there a cost to that to us? Is it a major cost?
Yes, so as I mentioned, I guess from a cost perspective, the Motor Vehicle Act for the province identifies what that default speed limit is for municipal streets. So many streets that are 50 kilometers an hour, that default, we don't post them at 50 kilometers an hour. Motorists have to understand that that's the default speed limit. One of the costs, among many, is if we drop to a low 40 kilometer an hour speed limit, we'd have to post those signs on every single street that we lower that speed to. So it'd be a cost for the installation and maintenance of those signs. Again, as well as the impact on our enforcement, as City Manager mentioned, and I mentioned, it's not going to have a significant influence on speed reduction. So you're going to have that continued impact and presence of the police department for enforcement. And again, every time we bring one of these forward, because it's a default in the act, we get to bring those before Common Council for ratification, which is in itself a set of costs. So there's a cost perspective. Again, as we mentioned, we have people in the community that follow the rules. So if you lower the speed limit to 40, and you have those people that aren't going to reduce their speed regardless of what you do, you have situations of that differential speeds, which is can be problematic in terms of causing rear-end collisions. So yes, there's a pure financial cost as well as a potential societal cost by just blanketing a reduction in speeds.
When I met with the families, and Councillor McKenzie went with me once to where we get a lot of calls from Cedar Ridge, that was the overall comment about, I mean, they all want rumble sticks and explain the cost. And a lot of them want 3-way stops or 4-way stops. A lot of them like that idea that KV police with, 170, 250, if you roll through the stop sign, a lot of them like that idea. And, but the overall attitude was we need to lower to 40. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ogden. Any other questions from committee? Moved by Mayor Reardon, looking for a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Sullivan. All in favor? Motion carried. Thank you very much. That concludes what's listed on our agenda. I look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mayor Reardon, seconded by Councillor Stewart. As such concludes our first meeting of our Public Safety